The 3 reasons you have to be thankful Paul Chryst is the head coach at the University of Wisconsin. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Ryan Herrings, your host of Locked On Badgers, back from vacation, ready to record again. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On one of your first listens every single day as we continue to try to build this Badger community. I'd also like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Big show today, something that I've told you we're going to do. I did the Paul Chryst weaknesses show, right? Where he needs to get a little bit better. But now, as promised, there's a lot of good here too, and I want to dig into it. I think it's really important. I'm going to give you 3 reasons, 3 big things that Paul Chryst does that should make every Badger fan pretty grateful that this is the head coach at our alma mater, at our favorite school, whatever it is, whatever the connection is to you. Let's go. Let's jump into it. Reason number 1, and this is interesting to me because when Paul Chryst was hired from Pitt, I got to be real with everybody. I'll always try to be real. I wasn't a big fan of the Paul Chryst hire. I thought there was like a little bit of nepotism there, like a little bit of what has he done besides being a Wisconsin guy? And I really thought he would struggle in this area, and he hasn't. Recruiting. I thought Paul Chryst, just with his kind of laid-back nature, lack of aggressiveness, maybe, just on the surface, that's what it looks like, right? I'm not saying that's how he actually is, but I thought he would really struggle recruiting at Wisconsin. And honestly, like, this year's class is off to a bit of a rough start, but you look at that 2019 class, that 2020 class, that 2021 class, that's probably absolutely in the modern era. I think Barry Alvarez had a couple classes where he went hard into New Jersey and Missouri, got Brett Bell and Hawthorne and landed some big-time talent. But at least all the way till then, nobody has recruited for a stretch of time at Wisconsin like Paul Chryst did. That 2021 class was 16th nationally. That's the highest rank Wisconsin's had in the modern recruiting, rankings. 16th is at Wisconsin. That's gold. In that class, if you look back at it, right, it's headlined by Nolan Rucci, who's a 5-star kid. They went into Pennsylvania and pulled Rucci out of Pennsylvania, a 5-star kid, 16th in the nation. That's a tremendous. But there was 4 or 5 other 4-star kids in that class, and to finish 16th in the country at Wisconsin, at a program that really under Bielema, under Gary Anderson, under the later Barry Alvarez years, even under some of Paul Chryst, has been 30, 40, 50th. 16th is a sign that he can get it done on a recruiting trail at a higher level than Wisconsin's used to. That's big time. I think the goal for Wisconsin should be top 25. If you can get kind of into that top 25 range, occasionally a top 20-ish recruiting class, higher than that's not realistic for Wisconsin. I wish it was. I just don't think it is. So if you get to 16 like Paul Chryst did, I mean, that's a great sign that he can build a recruiting department. Again, we lament the loss of Saeed Khalif to Michigan State. Chryst is the guy that hired Khalif, right? So have a little faith. We're going to get into some of that later as well. But have a little faith in the process. It took longer than I think a lot of us thought it should have to replace Saeed Khalif, but Mickey Turner's in there. We've already seen Paul Chryst build a successful recruiting department with Saeed Khalif and what he had there. So, yeah, I think if you're looking at the number 1 positive to take from Paul Chryst, the biggest maybe surprise to me personally is he's not just holding steady on the recruiting trail. He's been able to, in some years, really elevate what Wisconsin's been able to do. And we talked 2021, but look at 2020, right? You have the 5-star Logan Brown, or 2019 was Logan Brown, sorry. It was also Graham Mertz in that class. Graham Mertz was a quarterback that everybody wanted, the number 3 quarterback in the country. He came to Wisconsin. That's recruiting. And there's the development of Mertz hasn't matched our recruiting ranking, but that doesn't diminish the type of recruiting win he was. That's a blue chip pro style quarterback that it offers Notre Dame, Ohio State, who's down at Alabama, USC. That dude could have gone anywhere. And Paul Chryst and staff identified early, built the connection, built the relationship, and then they fought off every blue chip team in the country darn near, landed Mertz. That's a great sign. It's a big time sign. So I've been very impressed with Paul Chryst, the recruiter. The last couple cycles haven't been great. I think COVID messed him up, and I think Paul Chryst moves with a little bit more of a cautionary speed than other coaches. So I think not getting that recruiting department that he wants in place is going to hurt this class. But I think you're going to see it pick back up. I've seen enough to at a minimum, he's not going to be a weakness as a recruiter, which is what I thought he would be. I think he could be even more than that, though. We've seen it. We see 2019, 2020, they went out to Hawaii and landed a 4-star linebacker. And you look at some of the other wins, guys like TJ Bowlers. Spencer Lytle was a guy with Clemson offers. They've just done a really, really solid job when they had the recruiting department in place. COVID, I think, kind of messed them up a little bit. And I'm not trying to make excuses. Like, COVID happened for everybody. So it's not just a Wisconsin thing, but it was the combination of COVID and they lost Saeed Khalif and all that kind of went in together. I think you're going to see it bounce back. I think you see that 2019, 2020, 2021 trio of recruiting years, and there's a lot of belief there. I think you can pull from that. So for me, that's a big sign for Paul Chryst. I wasn't expecting it. I'll keep it real. I was wrong. To get 16th in the country at Wisconsin is the sign that he can achieve a certain type of ceiling, a certain type of upside that I think is really impressive. So that's my first one. We should be grateful for Paul Chryst, the head coach at the University of Wisconsin. I think he's shown that he can be a really good recruiter with this culture in place. Coming up next, I'm going to talk about another one where I don't think he gets enough credit. I think too many people gloss over what I'm going to bring up next. But first, today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As the sun comes up, small businesses are back in business. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier to grow your team. It is the largest collection of professionals in the world, all at your fingertips. The number one way to create a free job post. You can do it in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs. Reach your network and beyond, over 810 million people, and then add your job. And LinkedIn will do the work. The profile will spread the word that you're hiring, so your network can find the right people for you. There's tons of really good tools built into LinkedIn, so you can filter through applicants. So you're saving yourself time. You're not getting interviewing people that aren't qualified for the role, but those people also aren't wasting their time interviewing for a job that they don't want. It's win-win, easy to use. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? 40 million. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Nothing to lose. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you, everybody, again, for listening to Locked On Badgers. It is great to be back from vacation. I'm sorry we missed some content. I just couldn't get the Wi-Fi working, and some of the stuff I was recording wasn't coming out right, and I didn't want to put out garbage. So I really appreciate everybody sticking with me on this. We're back to the home farm. We got the Wi-Fi going. We're going to put up a bunch more content, a ton of stuff I want to get to. So really appreciate everyone tuning in. And let's talk about the second reason I think Paul Chryst is really good for Wisconsin. And this is an area I don't think he gets enough credit. Right. So, and this is, by the way, low key, this is another area I thought Paul would struggle with this as well. And this was kind of based on his time at Pitt, where if you go back to Pitt and you go back to the fans that were there, they were not happy with his staffing decisions, right? His defensive coordinator, his linebackers coach, they thought that he didn't build a very good staff, quite frankly. And I thought that was a concern for him coming over to Wisconsin, but he's done awesome. Like, Paul Chryst can build out a staff. Now, say what you want again about the speed of some of that, speed of replacing the recruiting department, but the hires he makes, and again, let's keep in mind, nobody bats 1,000. No person in any industry, in any job, nails every single hire they make. It's just not possible, but he bats a pretty high clip, right? He's really good at doing this. So if you remember when he came over, right, Paul Chryst came from Pitt. Dave Aranda was the defensive coordinator. And Paul Chryst had a defense coordinator in Pittsburgh. Now, it may seem on the outside like a no-brainer that you would keep Dave Aranda, who's a brilliant defensive mind and orchestrated a great Badgers defense. But a lot of coaches come in and clean house. If Paul Chryst really wanted to, he could have came in, brought his guy, wiped everybody out. And because Aranda's a 3-4 guy, all of Paul Chryst Pittsburgh teams were 4-3 teams. So it would have been really simple for Paul to come in. He had all the authority in the world to build his staff how he wanted to do it. I think Alvarez, I had Rich from the Buck Around on, and he said, I think Barry Alvarez kind of said you should keep Aranda. But at the end of the day, if Paul said, I'll take this job, but I need to build my staff, Barry's not stopping him. Barry's not telling him it's Aranda or you. Barry was hiring Chryst Chryst decided to keep Dave Aranda. Again, that may seem like a simple thing, but a lot of coaches fail at the simple things, right? He didn't. Keeping Aranda was a genius stroke. It allowed him to come in and not worry at all about the defensive side, to really settle back into Wisconsin, knowing that he had an elite defensive coordinator. And then when Aranda left, LSU came in and offered buku money, which Wisconsin just couldn't match. It was funny money for a defense coordinator. It was Chris Wilcox. Another just great move by Chryst. And then you just going down this lineage of Wisconsin defensive coordinators, right? Chryst is the guy that, again, this is one of those things where I don't feel like Chryst gets near enough credit. People will say, well, obviously Jim Leonard, football savant, always on the field, the coaches, the guy plays like a coach, played in the NFL for a long time. Chryst took him with no coaching experience and said, I'm going to make you a defensive backs coach, and then turned him into a defensive coordinator. I mean, it is, what he did was incredible. Like a lot of coaches won't take that risk on such a young guy. And for Paul to elevate him to that spot, to give him the trust to do it, to entrust the defense to him, it's been probably the best move of Paul Chryst's Wisconsin tenure. Because now, who's a better defensive coordinator in the country than Jim Leonard? Like, if Jim Leonard said, I am done in Madison and I want to go somewhere else, there would be 90 Division I teams that said, yeah, we'll hire you. I mean, he could almost name his defensive coordinator spot. I mean, there was certainly the rumors that the Packers were interested. We heard rumors that some schools down south were interested. Florida State, I think a couple years ago, was willing to open up the Brinks truck. There is so much would be so much interest in Jim Leonard. We're just very lucky as Wisconsin fans that he's a Wisconsin guy. He's comfortable, and I think he probably, I certainly don't want to speak for him, but I think he probably appreciates the fact that Paul Chryst put that level of trust in him that early, believed in him, and gave him the opportunity. And now he's pretty well compensated. Now he could make more at other spots, but that was just a phenomenal way that Paul Chryst handled the defensive transition, starting with Dave Aranda and going all the way down through Jim Leonard. It seemed like there was a plan there. There was never panic. There was always a successor. And the defense has been rock solid since Chryst has got here, largely because of the hires that he either kept or he put in place. And that's a credit to him. I think people gloss over that. I think people really look at it like, oh, that was an easy thing to keep Aranda and easy to keep, hire. A lot of coaches mess up easy things. You got to give credit where credit's due. Part of being a coach is nailing the layups, and he nailed the layups. But then you look at the other moves, like Bobby April. Again, that's a defensive hire. I'm sure Jim Leonard signed off on it and liked it and wanted it. But Chryst is the bottom line guy. Jim Leonard has become the best assistant coach on the team, a recruiting phenomenon. He might be the reason we land Tackett Curtis, which would probably be the best recruiting win in 20 years. I don't even know since when. So, April's a great hire. I really like Hank Boutique coming in with NFL experience. I really like Albus Whitted with NFL experience. All these guys either with NFL playing experience or coaching experience or both. Bobby Ingram, I think, is a tremendous hire. He comes very highly recommended. Former NFL great receiver Steve Smith raved about him. I love the coaching tree he comes from. Getting Bob Bostad back and then eventually getting him back to the offensive line, I think, is a slam dunk. I love Mickey Turner and the recruiting department. Listen, like I said, there's a couple flies in the ointment. Nobody bats 1,000. I think Chris Herring, I don't know. I don't know where he fits on this staff. It feels like he's a bit of a there, maybe because he's Chryst's guy. And obviously Bill Sheridan came over this offseason to coach inside linebackers, and then like a month later had to be let go. He resigned. It sounded like he was going to resign or be fired. He had that recruiting violation with Air Force. So I think there's a couple misses, but there's a couple misses for everybody. Nobody bats 1,000, but his hits have been just tremendous. Getting Ross on the defensive line, I think is a great move. Even his sketchy one, like I won't say sketchy. L. Johnson coming to coach running backs to me seems like a stretch. I don't love the move, but you almost at this point have to give Paul the benefit of the doubt. Just with the way he's built the staff, with how good he's been, with how solid the hires have been. So I really like what he's done there. I could quibble a little bit about. I think the makeup of the staff is a little wonky. I would prefer a quarterbacks coach, but at the end of the day, I think he's been great in this department. I don't think he gets enough credit for it because people just assume that these were easy things to do, and that's not the case. He's the CEO, and at the end of the day, he's responsible for all these hires, and they've been incredibly successful for the most part. So, yeah, we're going to get one more reason why I think Badger fans probably take Paul Chryst a little bit for granted, and something that's really important in coaching. So we're going to get into that next. But first, today's show is also brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and information. It is what we use at Locked On. Tons of news as well. What's happening, where players are moving, where coaches are moving. It's all on BetOnline. Plus Vegas games, roulette, blackjack, everything right here. Easy to use, intuitive website. And it's a great time to play the futures. If you have a read on a team, if you have a read on a league, this is a great time especially for basketball and football, where we're months out. We just had the NBA draft, football free agency and the draft have happened. If you have a good feel on a team, this is a great time to get that value. We've talked a lot about Wisconsin being 8.5 and where you would go. I've had a couple shows talking about it. It's a tough one. So go to BetOnline, the number one source for all the latest props, futures, wagers. Get your mobile device, learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you, everybody, again, for making this one of your first listens every day. Really appreciate it. We're building the community. That's what it's all about. Badger fans talking about Badgers stuff. And I'm here for the discourse. I hope you guys enjoy the content. We're going to keep putting it out. I want to talk about another one where, listen, this isn't a sexy one. This is almost like the game manager discussion, except I'm using it with coaches. Like when someone says a quarterback's a game manager, everyone just kind of like falls asleep a little bit. It's not as sexy. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit with Paul Chryst, but it's important. He's a program manager, right? He's a program manager, and that's super important. It's easy to overlook too, because Wisconsin has been so successful, but Paul Chryst never has a bad team. I feel silly saying it, like I got to present it as like a really big deal, because again, as Wisconsin fans, I think we're a little spoiled. There's teams that have there's coaches that have tons of bad years and stay employed. Right? Look at what's happening in Nebraska. Look at Northwestern. People think Pat Fitzgerald is one of the greatest coaches in the country. I think he's overrated. He's had 2 of his last 3 seasons have been horrendous. There's never been a bad Paul Chryst team. There's been mediocre-ish Paul Chryst teams. And even in those mediocre-ish Paul Chryst teams, he has winning records in the conference. Like, there's something to be said about always having at least a solid team, about starting every Big Ten season knowing at worst you're going to be 8-5, right? That's like the worst case. The atomic bomb dropped, the bottom fell out, everybody's hurt, we're 8-5. That's a really good season at Maryland, at Rutgers. That's a pretty solid season some years at Iowa, right? At Minnesota. That would be, listen, if Paul Chryst went 8-5 at Nebraska next year, they'd build him a statue, for Pete's sake. They haven't been to a bowl game in 5 years. This is what I'm saying. Like, don't lose sight of the fact that Paul Chryst is 65-23 at Wisconsin, 43-16 in conference. It's one of the best active marks in all of college football, his winning percentage. It matters. And I know sometimes we're just beating up on teams we should beat up on, but you still got to beat them. Right? You still got to beat them. And that doesn't mean we don't want more. It doesn't mean as Wisconsin fans, you have to say, well, that's fine enough. I don't want more. We all want more. We all aspire to take that next step, for Wisconsin to take that next step. We need to beat Ohio State at some point. We got to win the West again. But don't lose sight of the fact that Paul Chryst has won 2 Big Ten Coach of the Years awards, right? Don't lose sight of the fact that in 7 seasons, I'm throwing out the COVID year. I think that's just such a weird year, right? Stop, you start, you stop, you start. It's just so weird. In his 7 real seasons, he's won 10 games 4 times, 10 plus games 4 times. Right? That's really good. So there is definitely something to be said about having a very high floor, having, every year kind of going into it and thinking a disaster is winning 8 games. And Paul Chryst has been the architect of this program for long enough that we can expect that to continue, right? It's a big deal. It matters. Consistency matters. Keeping the culture matters. Like I said, he's a program manager. I think we're all confident in his ability to manage players, all right, to the best of his ability to keep Wisconsin clean, to the best of his ability to maintain the reputation of Wisconsin as a strong academic and athletic institution. Like, it's not win at all costs at Wisconsin. And I don't want it to be. And I really believe both Greg Gard and Paul Chryst operate in that way. Like, it matters to them doing it the right way. I think the culture's there. They're stewards of that culture. And again, I know some people that may not matter a lot to, or they may not think it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal. I think Wisconsin wins with culture, and they have to up the talent. There's a lot of things they need to do. Listen, Paul Chryst isn't perfect, right? Just like I said on my show where I talked about some of the issues I have with Paul Chryst, I said during that show, but he also does a lot of things really good. Like, I don't want to, in this show, paint him out like he's Bear Bryant, but let's not lose sight of the fact that he builds a great culture. Kids generally seem to like him. Families rave about him of players that are there for the most part. Again, nobody's bets 100 on all this. His hires are incredible. He raised the recruiting profile at Wisconsin. And he's also presiding over a really weird, tough time for a lot of coaches with NIL, with the transfer rules, with COVID having happened. Like, he's had to deal with stuff that Bielema, Gary Anderson, Barry Alvarez didn't have to deal with. And despite all that, right, Wisconsin just keeps chugging through the night. This is a steady locomotive. Like, you could set your watch to Wisconsin winning 8, 9, 10 games. And you have to give Paul Chryst some credit to that. He's not just at the wheel of a ship that's on autopilot. He's making hires. He's recruiting. We're a couple cycles in for him now. It's all his players, and it's been his players for a while. And Wisconsin continues to be a really solid, at a minimum, a really solid football team with some years of really good. So, yeah, I've talked about it. I think he's a really good coach for Wisconsin. I think there's really some foibles there that drive me nuts with Paul, because I think if he could polish those out, he could be an elite coach because of these other things he does in terms of building out his coaching staff, running a culture, keeping his team ready, having a high floor. He does so many things really well that we're lucky to have him. I truly believe that, even though I'm pretty harsh on some of the stuff he does. I think he's a very good head coach overall, and he's just a couple adjustments, like a couple tweaks, maybe a bit of a mentality tweak from being an elite coach. He's not an elite coach because he's got some things to clean up, but he's definitely a far above average coach. So I hope everyone enjoyed the show. That's my kind of my two sides of my Paul Chryst, the last two shows I've done. Let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, hit me up. I'd love to have this discussion with a couple fans on the show as well, or a couple people. So if you're interested, let me know. I'll chop it up with you. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a like, leave a review. It is some of the best ways to kind of support the channel if you enjoy it. Aside from that, I appreciate everyone tuning in. Until we talk next time, let's go Badgers.